Well, let's get started. Thank you guys for coming tonight. Thank you, folks, for joining us on this rainy or snowy evening, depending on where you are. My name is Craig Ettinger. I'm director of the Maine Folklife Center and the Maine Studies Program at the University of Maine. And I'll be kind of moderating this session this evening, although it's an informal session, and people will have an opportunity to ask questions of our presenters if they'd like towards the end of this 1 hour or so that we plan to be here. If you wouldn't mind using the chat room, if you can make that available. If you're not too familiar with Zoom, if you do go up to your view link at the top of your screen, you will be able to open the chat window, and then you can use that to post a question of the panelist if you'd like. And there's also a chat button at the bottom of the screen, and you can just click on that. And what I'll do is I'll moderate those questions towards the end of the session in about our last third, and I will put those questions directly to the presenters. So tonight we have a couple of the participants in our Jack Pine project. Last year, when the coronavirus hit, and the first month or so, of course, people didn't really know how long it was going to last, what the impacts would be, how it would affect the economy. But one thing became fairly clear early on is that many of the arts organizations and artists around the state, performing artists in particular, were really being impacted by the inability to perform live, among other things. So I thought, and then I had some conversations with others at the University of Maine about the idea of a project that would do a couple of different things. One, it would actually hire some of Maine's artists in different media over a period of a few months to work on a particular project. Two, it would reach out to residents of the state of Maine who were experiencing the pandemic in different ways. And then three, it would have those artists in their various specialties work with these people, residents of the state, who were amateurs, basically, who were non artists, to express themselves through the arts, express the way that the pandemic was affecting them, their families, their loved ones, and their various feelings and impressions of what was going on around them. So we had a series of about 9 or 10 different workshops covering everything from the visual arts to fiber arts to children's books. Interviews with business owners in Belfast, Maine, and then we had music workshops as well, songwriting workshops. And tonight, the first of two sessions to talk about some of the Jack Pine Project workshops, we're featuring two of those artists, musicians, who ran independent workshops. Independent of each other, that is, to work with non musicians to help them express their feelings and tell their stories about the COVID-19 pandemic. So, over the course of the next hour, we're going to hear from those two artists slash musicians and music therapists, trained music therapists, Kate Beaver and Carla Tanguay, who will tell you each their story of working with their particular group or cohort, as we called them. And then after that, we'll have a discussion with them about the value of music in particular as a means of expressing feelings, as a means of working through various feelings, of healing from various traumas and physical illnesses and so forth that may have affected people. So that's how we're going to kind of understand better the role of the arts in general and the role of music in particular in helping people. So we'll start off with Kate Beaver, who has a music therapy business called Modulations. Oops, I have the wrong one. That's Carla's. Um, whose business is called Maine Music and Health, which is in the Portland area, and she works throughout southern Maine on music therapy and working with adults and sometimes children, but primarily adults in various venues. Her website is excellent. She's really sort of explained the work she does there, the different kind of projects she has worked on, and so forth. She's also helped us a little bit with some of our media stuff, which I appreciate very much. And Kate will start off by telling a little bit about her workshop and then sharing a couple of examples of what came out of that. So, Kate, you can unmute yourself as you
Awesome.
just have done, and I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for having us. I'm really grateful to UMO and the Jack Pine projects for supporting us as teaching artists and, doing good in the community for the participants. These have been really interesting workshops to go through. So I'll talk a little bit about mine, which was a 1 month long songwriting workshop, which is very intensive. I don't know if any of the people listening in have tried to write a song, but it is tough to do in such a quick amount of time. But I think it really captured this moment. This workshop was open to anyone really, but especially people who had experienced a change in their work because of the pandemic. So people who had lost work, had to retire early, were self-employed and dealing with some changes there. And so a lot of this had to do with lyrics, but I tried to help people focus on dreams and hope for the future. So we did write lyrics about the pandemic experience, but we also wrote about our hope for what would happen after that and what we wanted to be doing. There was an assignment each week to kind of guide this process, and then a weekly drop-in session for reflection and discussion. So this was a very self-guided group. People got together just a few times actually as a group, and most of the weekly drop-ins were just 1 or 2 people. We started by sharing our favorite music with each other and making playlists that kind of represented our personal identities, which is a nice way to just share yourself with a group, especially people you haven't met in person. So this was 6 people who had never met and were just joining this songwriting group with not much songwriting experience. So we started by just sharing our favorite music with each other and talking about the lyrics and what they meant to each other, and then got into the songwriting. So I'm going to share a couple examples today. This group was mostly non-musicians, and I say that with quotations because I believe that everyone is a musician, and we're just kind of bringing out our inner music. So this group were people who maybe play an instrument but hadn't in a while, or actually one person in the group was a music therapist who had switched careers and hadn't played or written music in about 25 years. And then everyone kind of needed different support. So one of the first things I did was I created a meditation, which I'll put a link to that in the chat, but I did sort of a musical meditation to help people listen and just kind of get into a more relaxed headspace, which helps bring out creativity. I also made a YouTube video that was an overview of how to use GarageBand. So technology was one of the barriers. I found some of the group members were not comfortable with recording technology or figuring out how to edit their song. And that's why, as I share the songs, you'll see that a few people did record and a few people just shared their lyrics and not the actual song. So that was one barrier that we had to overcome. I think that's it. So I'll just jump into sharing the songs. Oh, and then the last thing that I did was I wrote my own song as an example of both the songwriting technique and of using the technology. So the song that I wrote kind of came about in a funny way. I was in the second week of this group and I just woke up in the middle of the night and had this song in my head. I was like, okay, that's great. I wrote the song. And that is not how I had been teaching how to write a song, but I think I've just been in that process a lot more, so it came kind of naturally. But I chose to record it completely on GarageBand, so there's no sort of acoustic instruments in it. It's totally computerized, and that was just to show the different ways that you can use musical sounds in GarageBand. So let me pull up a piece of that. There we go. So I'm going to start towards the end. So this song, I played piano, a GarageBand, a MIDI piano, and some strings. And then I included, because the dream that I had about the song actually had my grandfather singing in it to me as a child, which was really strange. My grandfather was a singer in the Portland Community Chorus for years, so it kind of made sense that that came up. But I chose to include his sort of tenor voice as a backing vocal towards the end of the song. So you'll hear that, and then you'll hear a little harp run at the end. So I'll just play about 30 seconds of this. Could you hear that okay? Awesome. Storm is passing over. Look up, look up. Storm is passing over. Look up. You are So that's a little bit of that one. And then I wrote a blog about this, which I'll also share later, but you can see some of I'll skip the ones that are recorded for now. And then the people that didn't send in their recording and just sent the words, there's some really meaningful things, sort of themes that came out here. And they do end on a positive note. So this one, here we are together, we'll navigate the sea at the end. Just kind of giving hope that we're going to get through this. This was about her and her daughter. And then this person was a teacher that was dealing with everything we know that educators have had to deal with during the pandemic. And she was just thinking about sort of getting some freedom out of her situation. And Carrie did record her song on her phone. She just never sent it to me. And I respected that as part of the process, that not everybody wants to share their songs or are comfortable sharing their songs. And these are all people that aren't, they're not professional musicians, so they're just doing this for fun and to kind of practice and getting comfortable with it. And then we have Sharon's song, who I think is on here today. And I can, going too far. So I'll share a little bit of this one too. And this was a song about dealing with the changes of sort of letting go of some of our holiday traditions and not being able to be with family, which is really tough. So I'm going to share, let's see. I chose little snippets earlier to share of each song. Traditions that we hold dear, we hope won't disappear. Carolers may not be heard, decorations may seem absurd. Christmas will still arrive. We'll get through, I know we will. We'll be together next year. Christmas will still arrive. Nice. So that one was GarageBand too. I think I helped record the piano in that, and then she sang over it. And so there was a lot of learning and how to collaborate virtually with music. And it can be helpful because you can add different instruments and add different voices, but it can also be really tough because, I'll record something and then the person has to figure out the right way to sing over it in time. So that one came out really nice. And then Chris's song, so Chris is the person that was a music therapist, I think he said about 25 years ago. So he has some musical experience, but he said he hadn't been writing songs or playing any music in years, and that this program really helped him kind of get re-inspired. And I like this quote that he wrote here. He said, "I could keep perfecting it ad nauseum. Instead, I am being vulnerable and sharing it unfinished, too dramatic at times, a little slow in tempo, and altogether quite imperfect. Yet the process was powerful for me and reawakened some parts of me that have been quiet for a couple of decades." I tried to, in guiding this group, I tried to help people let go of this need for perfection and getting it right, to try to allow space for just creativity and flow. And that's tough, especially when we're not meeting in person, to kind of inspire people in that way. But I think they all did a really good job with that. And it was interesting to see Chris, in presenting his song, saying, it's not finished, it's a little too dramatic, and things that I wouldn't notice as a listener. All of these songs sound so good to me, and I know that even mine, you listen to your own song and you have all these feelings and sort of self-judgment. So it's also a really good experience to just have people sharing their music with each other with just positive feedback, because this is not about perfection. We're not going to like sell these songs on CDs or share them with too many people. So I think that's one also good thing about this project is just getting people's creativity flowing. I'll share a little bit of Chris's song, and I really liked his style. It was I don't know if he would like me saying this, but it reminded me of sort of a Mr. Rogers. It has this like nice Broadway feel, but very calming too. So I'll play the beginning of his.
Everything's changed, but nothing's changed. Everything's changed, but here I am. Everything's changed, but now I see the incredible lightness of being. COVID, Trump, and Fauci were the markers of my days. Money, time, and status went their way. Everything I thought was me was thrown to the wind. Illusions were delusions in this play, resisting the temptation to believe I was no more. I rode upon the breath that is my source. Breathing will be easy and reveal my who I am, but it challenged my illusions with such force. Everything's changed, but nothing's changed. Yes, everything's changed, but here I am.
Nice. I will share the links so that you can hear all of these, and I put their lyrics up on my site too. So a lot of really lovely and powerful things came out of these groups. Does anyone have questions about any of the process? So I think there's a lot in between me saying, let's write a song and these songs that came out. But each week I tried to add a new exercise. So like, all right, now journal a little bit about your experience and then pull some key phrases and words out of that journaling. And that's where we get our lyrics from. And then listening back to your playlists of the music that inspires you, what aspects and elements of music sort of represent the feelings that are coming out in your journaling, and then how can we combine all of that into a new piece of music. That's the process.
I can ask one question about that. I know we'll
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk more after Carla talks and kind of have a
Mm-hmm.
three-person conversation and bring in some questions from the audience as well. But I just wondered, as a songwriter yourself and a musician yourself, and a music therapist, how do you balance what you do when you're working with individuals in terms of focusing on the music and kind of letting them tap into their inner musician versus tapping into the feelings or going through the process of therapy and healing, which seem to be two very different things. And I'm just wondering how you strike a balance there.
I think they actually coincide a lot. I think they're pretty intertwined in this work. So as people, even if we're just focusing on music, there are going to be emotions that come up, whether it's related to how the music's making us feel or how we feel about making music. And that's the one in this group that I saw a bigger amount of. So people coming to the drop-in and just saying, I really beating myself up here. I can't come up with anything. Everything I recorded sounds like crap. So just trying to support people through that process of like letting go of this experience we had probably as children of like, there are musicians and there's non-musicians and you're either one or the other. So really just trying to get people to feel playful is a huge part of it. And then the other place it comes in is just music sort of provokes emotion when we're listening to it, no matter what it is. So helping people explore, like, what is it that you feel when you're listening to different styles and genres? Yeah.
Was that a part of the workshop as well? Did you have the participants listen to and comment on or react to each other's music?
I tried to. This group was kind of disjointed schedule wise because I had a few drop in options, and so oftentimes there would only be one or two people that would show up. So it was a little hard to get that interaction that we usually have in an in person setting. But I did, yeah, we shared all the playlists. Most people made them on Spotify and just kind of went over, like, here are the songs that I've been listening to lately, and here's what they mean to me. And people could give feedback on each other's. It was interesting to see just what different people like to listen to.
I'll ask one final question here, and that is if there was an overall tone or mood that you think described all of the participants, what would that be? Or was there one kind of mood as they composed their songs?
Uh, Sort of a theme that I feel, hopefully I'm not just projecting it, but I think this theme of grief has been really prevalent, especially for working with people who had to let go of some of their work or different, work related aspects of life. I can't say that everyone in the group talked about grief, but it came up in every conversation. And there were even a few people that were dealing with changes in personal relationships. So I think grieving all of these losses was a theme that wove through, and then finding the hope that comes out of that, and hope for the future was the big theme that we tried to get through in our songs.
Maybe we can pick up that particular theme when we have a larger discussion, because I'd love to ask Carla about that as well as the kind of hopeful elements that come out of a project like this. Thank you really a lot for your work on this project, for sharing all of those samples as you just did and on your website, and for describing it as you just did. And then we'll get back to you in just a few minutes, Kate.
Thanks.
Great. Carla, so your cohort was somewhat different, and I'll let you describe that in just a moment. But I'd love for you to pick up on some of those ideas from Kate, but then just to talk about your own project, which took place in the Ellsworth area. So, Carla Tanguay, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Craig. Thanks for putting this together and for conceiving of the whole Jack Pine project idea. So yeah, my cohort was a small group who met all together for each session, and these were all individuals who were facing a cancer diagnosis, and so the idea was to explore what is it like to have already been facing cancer and then COVID comes along. So that's what I wanted to explore. So I opened it up to a local cancer center, and we kind of advertised just out there who wants to be a part of this. And again, we weren't targeting musicians specifically, but just targeting anybody who had a cancer diagnosis and was going through COVID. So our group, we ended up with 3 people who were in the group, and we met every week, I believe, every week for 3 weeks initially, but then we ended up meeting several more times to do the recording portion of it. So my process, even though we were all together, did have a lot of similarities with Kate's, in that we started with just what kind of music do you like, and share a favorite song, a meaningful song with the group. That's just such a great way to just develop relationships between people quickly, right? Sharing the kind of music that you love, sharing your favorite song can be a really great way to just build those connections quickly, which is what we needed to do if we were going to write a song together over Zoom. And this was early in the pandemic, so this was all still pretty new to us. So our first group, we just used our love of music and each other's favorite songs as a way to bond and get to know each other a bit. People all came to the first group with a song that they wanted to share, an existing song that just kind of expressed something that they wanted to express about what they've been going through. We talked about the meaning of those songs, talked about lyrics a little bit. So starting again with talking about things that are a little separate from yourself, right? So you can start by talking about, well, what did that person and that song mean? And then you can start to say, well, and that's what it brings up in me. And then at the end of the first group, we did a Mad Libs songwriting, which is just a really silly way to get everybody starting to feel comfortable sharing ideas. So Mad Libs songwriting is just like Mad Libs, right? So you have a song. I think we used Hey Jude. So you take a familiar song. I choose, some words that we take out and just give to everybody, all right, tell me an adjective, a noun, things like that. So the group did that together. And then I put up the lyrics that we had just written, and we all sang it together. And the group just had a blast with it. There was just so much laughter, participation. And I think after that group, everybody just left feeling like, hey, I can do this. Like, this is something I can do. This is fun. Just, again, the amount that they bonded just over that first week was really, really powerful. So the second week, people actually came with songs that they had started to write themselves. I sent home a little homework assignment of some songs, again, like pre-existing songs that people knew once I knew the kind of music people liked, and just did what we call fill-in-the-blank songwriting. So I would take a song that they probably already knew and just had some words that were gone that they could just write in a word that better reflected what they wanted to say. So people came back to the second week with their own fill-in-the-blank songwriting. And again, this was a group of people who none of whom considered themselves musicians, and they were so excited to sing each other their songs. It was really fun. So everybody wanted to sing and share the song that they had written. They basically got to choose between a couple different options I gave them. And again, it was just a way to show just how quickly people can bond through music, and that positivity that came out of that. So after that, we started talking about, okay, how are we going to all write a song together? Because that was the product that was going to come out of our workshop, was a song that we all wrote together. So we spent a lot of time, going back and forth between sharing these songs and just talking about what this experience had been like for everybody. What is it like to go through COVID while also having cancer? So I'd have prompts sometimes and be writing down notes as people talked about themes that kept coming up. So then we started to formulate what's our shared song going to be. So we kind of talked about what musical styles everybody enjoyed. And we just kind of went, after that session, we kind of all just went and had a week on our own to percolate. And after that, one of the group members came back with a completely rewritten version of So This Is Christmas by John Lennon. And she presented that to the group, and the group just absolutely loved it and said, yes, this is what we want to do. So we took that version and kind of people explored that and said, well, these were the lyrics from her version that really resonated with me. This is what I want to keep in the original or in the final. And then everybody also put in their own. And, when we had to go through finding rhyme and making the meter fit. So we went through that whole musical process together, which was a really interesting thing to do together and over Zoom, of course. So after a week of that, we kind of had our final version, and then became the real challenge. Then was the technological challenge of how are we going to record this song all together from different places, since we can't be together. So once we had a final version of the lyrics, we actually decided then to change the music a little bit as well. We decided to change the melody a bit so that it wasn't just a complete rewrite, but that we were adding our own touch to it. So we did talk about that. And I recorded a version of the song, of the lyrics, and sent that to everybody. And then they needed to find a way that they could listen to it over headphones and sing into something that they could record themselves so that they could then send me their track. So then I had 4 different tracks, a track from everybody, hopefully, singing along with the master track. So then I stitched those together into a version that had everybody. One of our participants also wanted to play an instrument in the background, so we worked that in as well. And then we wanted to make a video of it because everybody was just so excited about the process and feeling so positive about it. So then we had to figure out, how do you make a video of that? And I'll tell you, the secret to most of the group singing videos that you've seen online probably is lip syncing. So we were all listening to a version of it and just recording ourselves. Because I don't know if any of you have ever tried singing together on Zoom. You can't do it all at the same time because of the lag issues. So, while as a music therapist, the product is never the highlight of something that I do. We do want to share with you our final creation. So I'm going to try to pull that up right here and share with you our song. So this is the song and video that our group created. Is that coming through?
So this is COVID, a deadly disease, silent and stealthy, until we can't breathe. A life-threatening illness we call COVID-19. We've lost far too many, and most go unseen. And so this is cancer. How much can we take? The pain and the suffering, with hardly a break. A stressful 2020, not such a good year. We must keep our distance, but I want someone here. COVID and cancer, layers of fear. I want my life back. The future's unclear. We got double the threat. Let's all wear a mask. COVID and cancer, we are up for next. We have the power to change what we can. Be positive and vigilant. been quite a year. Let's work together and conquer our fears. COVID and cancer, it's been quite a year. Let's work together and conquer our fears.
I'm just going to stop my background there so it doesn't start playing the next video. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to let that speak for itself and turn it back over to Craig for continued
Well,
discussion.
that's terrific. Thank you very much, Carla. Before I open up to both of you for questions, I wanted to ask you a couple specific questions like I did for Kate. And I also wanted to invite people who are out there in the Zoom room to place any questions in chat that they would like to using that chat button at the bottom of their screen. And I'll begin to ask Kate and Carla some of those questions in sort of the second part of our discussion. Kate, Carla, my questions to you. The first one is clearly people, when speaking about personal health issues in particular, there's an element of privacy and intimacy there. And I know that at least one of your participants didn't want to be in the final video for that reason. How was this process different from your typical music therapy work, especially with cancer patients or other individuals who may be dealing with a medical issue, in terms of the public aspect of it, knowing that at the end of it, because of my interest in terms of the project, they would be asked to share this with the wider world. How was that different from your normal working style?
Yeah, it did feel quite a bit different, and I think you'll remember that I was concerned about it from the beginning. Was how do I? It's so different. I'm not used to working towards a product, and so I just made sure I was very clear with my participants from the very beginning that this is not a typical therapy group, that the goal of this is to produce a public work of art, since that was the goal of the Jack Pine Project. So just, being clear with everybody, making sure everybody's understanding was the same throughout, I'm sure changed what people were willing to share. But again, since it was clear from the beginning, since we talked about it throughout, people were excited to share what they did share. And it did come up sometimes during sessions as well. And I had moments where somebody said, because we recorded some of our process, even our groups, and somebody would say, "Can you turn off the recording of this?" So it was a little challenging to navigate that difference, because I'm not used to doing that. I'm used to, creating that safe therapy space, and having that throughout, and never having, there's never a chance that it's going to leave that room. But setting the clear expectation, and again, the people who chose to participate in this did so because they wanted to share what they were creating with the world.
Okay, thank you for that. The second question I had specific to you was, it's clear that and it comes through in the song, obviously, that the additional fear and burden of dealing with the risk of COVID on top of dealing with cancer, being immunocompromised possibly, that those things really compounded each other. But I'm also wondering if cancer patients and others with chronic illnesses have a sort of resilience or toughness that they've built up as a result of that was an asset during the pandemic.
Absolutely. And that was one of the reasons that I thought about doing it with this population is, people who have cancer already are living with uncertainty. They're already living with, changes to their daily life, changes to what they can do, changes with what they're comfortable with. So in some ways, COVID to them was just one more thing that still had a lot of similarities to it. And they were able to use some of those skills that they had used, those coping skills they had used throughout their cancer diagnosis, to cope with COVID. I think the biggest change, though, was the isolation that came with COVID, that really added to that.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Just
How that affected them and
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail, just because those weren't things that were necessarily in the song. But just, the fact that during COVID, you can't have your family members there with you, going to treatments or maybe even visiting. There was, suddenly you're facing something and you may be facing it without the support system that you're used to.
right. Okay, very, very interesting. I'm going to ask a question from Anne. One thing I was struck by when listening to both Kate and Carla was the theme of reconnecting to a sense of playfulness as part of the songwriting process. In thinking about your work with people both before and then during the pandemic, how do you think this collective experience of COVID has influenced the extent to which people are open to this type of creative risk? What about in terms of your own individual songwriting process? And she also wanted to add that all of the material that came out of both, whoops, I can't read down the screen there, both workshops to be really powerful, and appreciate people's willingness to share it with us. Yeah, I concur with that. So what do you think about that element of risk-taking and the influence of COVID on that, and this aspect of playfulness as well? And either Kate or Carla, this is directed to either of you, sorry.
I mean, I felt like it came out a lot, and whether that was because of COVID or if it's, I think naturally it is something that often happens in music, is it gives us that opportunity to be playful and to be creative and to try new things. And the way that I think Kate and I both structured our workshops was to have it be a safe place for people to try new things and make mistakes and be imperfect. And once people realize that they can be creative and that it's not going to be a space for criticism, but it's going to be a space of support, I think that almost always comes out is that relief, and then that playfulness comes out in people.
Yeah, and I heard that from some of the participants when I asked, what made you sign up for this project? A few of them said, well, why not? And I think the combination of having a lot more open time during the pandemic, especially because I was working with people who had either lost their jobs or left their jobs, the combination of the free time and the pandemic sort of having us all face this idea that life is short. And sometimes it might be even shorter than we expect it to be. So why not do something fun or do something that you've wanted to do but haven't been brave enough to try? And so I think that theme has come out for a lot of us. And even myself as a musician this year, there's, facing it as a musician and realizing you've lost all your work. You have no control over that. You have no control over it coming back. You have no control over your income as a self-employed person. And all of that is really scary and can make you shut down, but it also kind of inspires you to do that same thing where you say, well, why not? And so a lot of us did take some time to be more creative. And this year I recorded my first solo album, and I'm a percussionist. So most of the time I'm on other people's recordings and, playing drums or percussion in the back. And this year I was like, well, why not? I'll just record my own. So I think it has come out. For a lot of people, I think COVID has pushed us to just kind of let go, which is a playful process.
How does that tie in with what the overall goals of music therapy are? What do you hope people become or find out about themselves or transform themselves through the process of music therapy?
I always hope people will become more creative and playful, but typically the goals of music therapy are based on the population. So when I'm working at the hospital, with people with brain injury, we're working on speech or movement. And when I'm working in the cancer clinic, we're working on stress and anxiety relief and pain relief, pre and post operation, things like that. So they're very non-creative sounding goals, but it's always in the back of my mind, or in the front of my mind really, that through that process, it is music therapy, and so the whole thing is a creative and playful process. And I'm hoping that the clients that I work with are experiencing that sort of inner child coming out, even if we're working on taking a step or saying a sentence.
Carla, what about you? How do you see what your mission is as a music therapist in working with different populations?
Helping people achieve whatever goal they, so it's not so much about what my goal is for them. It's helping them figure out what's their goal, and how can I and music help them support that. I do work with a lot of kids who are really young, so they might not be able to verbalize it, but still, it's how do you help them find, tap into their uniqueness, tap into the thing that makes them strong, the thing that makes them shine, the thing that they can, that they can grow that part of themselves, so that they can be resilient as they go through life with whatever challenges, that they might be seeing in other parts of their life. Well, what's the part of you that's strong and that's shining, and help them really help bring that to the forefront.
How would either of you say that this year has impacted you personally, and especially the work that you do and how you do it?
It's changed everything about how we work for sure. So before COVID, my average day would be to go to a preschool perhaps and do a group, with 10, 15 kids, and then to go to a nursing home and maybe do a group, and then maybe go to a different nursing home and do a one-on-one with somebody, and then go to a home and see a child with their family. So none of that was possible with COVID. And so it was a huge change. I was able to eventually transition a lot of my practice online. So I am now providing online music therapy services. Not all of my clients were able to transition to online, but I've also picked up some new clients since I've gone online. And so being online instead of in person, also just that changes a lot of how I do music therapy. So many of my go-to things that I would do with people you can't do on the computer, but it's also actually opened up some really interesting new ways of working. I see parents a lot more now, because I used to see children in schools, and then suddenly I got to see their parents so much more. Got to see siblings and get a different picture of their lives. Got to work more actually with other therapists, because it wasn't as hard to get our schedules to line up. So I get to do a lot more co-treating with speech therapists and occupational therapists, where we could all be on the screen together working on the same goals. And there were just some people who maybe just lived far out, in a part of Maine where they weren't able to access music therapy in the past, that have been able to access it now that they can access it online. So it changed a lot. A lot of those things were hard to let go of, but then there were some exciting new things as well.
I had a similar experience.
How about you, Kate?
Yeah, the work that I was able to transition to virtual was actually really interesting. Usually the instruments that I bring to clients' houses or to the hospital are, portable and washable. And so it was actually nice to get to use all my guitar pedals and amps and bigger percussion instruments and kind of explore all those sounds in the sessions. So that was fun. But I think the overall thing that's come out of this is it's made me really think about the advocacy work that we have to do. Prior to the pandemic, I was working in the hospital 3 days a week, and then a lot of my my clients that I saw at their homes were people who are deaf and blind, in addition to having other disabilities. And all that work just kind of disappeared. And I've thought a lot about how we have to advocate for our profession. Like, why is music therapy not allowed to come back at the same time as other therapies? That's part of it. But also advocating for my clients who live in group homes and have been so isolated during this pandemic and just not able to make the same choices that we're able to make, even if those choices might not be the right one. So it's just been really, there was a lot of grieving and processing about the experience of the people that I had worked with for so long, and just how to support them when I wasn't able to even access those facilities anymore.
What was the reason for music therapy not being allowed to return in the same way as other forms of therapy? Is this a state decision?
No, it's really not a decision. I think it has more to do with the way that we work. So we're often contract workers, or we work on sort of a grant that's part of some section of the hospital, and so it just feels like an extra service, even though you're going there, multiple times a week, and all the staff know you, and you feel like you're part of the team. So I think it's just more the way that music therapy gets funded in these facilities, and that's something that we really have been working hard to change, because it just makes it hard to give the best service.
You mentioned instruments. I'm wondering if you had to get creative. You normally would probably bring percussion instruments and so forth with you. Were you giving instructions on how to make shakers out of solo cups, or bang on pots and pans, or how did you deal with that?
Yeah, a little bit of all of that. I mean, I'm a percussionist first, so I think a lot about like body percussion and like found objects and how to just find rhythm and everything. So I've worked with people on that. A lot of my clients have instruments, and early in the pandemic, I sent instruments to a few people on loan. So I had a couple of keyboards that had been donated, and I brought those to a couple group homes. There's a ukulele program at the hospital, so we were donating ukuleles to some of the families. But I think you can make music out of anything, and a lot of it is just about keeping the engagement up, especially for people who can't leave their house. I don't know if Carla had.
Yeah, Carla, did you did you have to get creative as well?
Yeah, and the same things, so I dropped off instrument packets for some of my programs. Some it's just use what's there.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people, it's find ways to use what's there. Yeah.
Did you guys hear any stories over the past year about families or other groups of people that kind of found a new meaning through music? I mean, in the old days, people would have done that as home entertainment in their kitchens, obviously. And I'm wondering if you found that to be the case at all, or if you knew any families, for example, who began making music on a regular basis, where before it was only when you came to their home, for example.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, I got to know some families in a different way, during this because the kids were at home instead of at school when I saw them, or other things, or parents were at home more and weren't at work. So I've absolutely had some families where they're all making music together now, in a different way. Yeah, mostly because they were home together, and they just found like it was a really powerful way to connect, something fun that they could do together, but also a way that they could work on some family communication or just other techniques of ways to be together in a small space for a long period of time.
Yeah. Some of my adult clients who live independently or in a group home facility, their parents started joining the Zoom calls, which had never, they don't usually come to the sessions. And that was really nice for the parents to get to see, like, wow, my adult child is doing all of these things that I didn't even realize they could do. So that was a beautiful part. And then trying to engage the parents, which was new and interesting for me to try to do. And then I also had a pandemic project that I just loved, and an old client of mine had me build a percussion wall in their house. So I just put together all of these like instruments and found objects and built this physical wall so that the person could play instruments at, he's in a wheelchair, so at wheelchair level and foot level, things that you can kick and shake. And that was just a really fun project, and it's been really great to see people playing with it and the family playing with it together. And I think that wouldn't have happened on a regular year because people are just, again, sparking all these new ways to interact in their homes together.
That's great. I wanted to ask again if anyone out there who's watching in our audience had any questions for either of our panelists. If so, I hope you have access to the chat button and we've created that setting correctly. We're almost getting towards the end of the hour. Let me ask you guys what kind of hopeful messages came out of this project or perhaps other work you've done since then. What are some of the things that you're hearing now that you feel like maybe there's a change in the air, or just how your work has helped people see things in a different perspective, maybe a brighter perspective? Carla, do you want to tackle that one first?
Certainly the song that the group came up with, and the individual ones which I didn't share, they were heavy, don't get me wrong, but they also had this message of hope and lightness, and especially some of the individual ones that they wrote that I didn't share. I think people are resilient, and especially when given the opportunity, a safe place to share their struggles and to share their grief and their loss. Once you're able to do that, then you can start to look towards what's hopeful and what's ahead. Even if, your definition of hope needs to change a little bit.
I love that.
Kate, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the people that I was working with talked a lot about just finding community, and so being more intentional about building a community when you feel alone. And the pandemic made a lot of people feel alone. So it's finding that balance of our, developing our own inner resources to feel better, but also building community so that we have social support when we need it.
Excellent. Well, I really want to thank you guys so much, not only for tonight, but for your work on this project, for being willing to kind of put yourselves out there and bring these things to fruition. I know it was an intense process, I'm sure, for both of you and for your participants, but it's very meaningful, and listening to the songs is really special, so I appreciate you guys sharing that with us. I also want to make sure I thank Ann Bardaglio, who yes, Michelle, you can post the links if you wouldn't mind. Ann Bardaglio is a grad student in the Maine Studies program at the University of Maine, and she's been helping me this semester and helped organize this event. And I want to thank very much the staff at the Fred Hutchinson Center, UMaine's Community Outreach Center in Belfast, and Shell Patton is here tonight from there, and Kim Wilson-Raymond, the director, Michelle Crystal, and Sam Overlock, who has done a lot of the technical stuff for us. This project wouldn't have been possible without them, and of course without all the artists and participants. So thank you again, you guys. Any final thoughts, Carla or Kate?
Thank you again for doing this, for hosting the Jack Pine Project, and for this opportunity to talk about it tonight.
Yeah, thank you. This was really special.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and my pleasure meeting both of you and seeing the work that you do and learning more about it. So thanks again. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll post the video on the Jack Pine Project website. You can also go to that website, jackpineproject.com, if you want to learn about the other workshops. And next Friday, we'll have Stephen Legavietz, the founder of the Camden Shakespeare Festival and producer and director of 100 or 200 different plays. And and he did a wonderful workshop of dramatic monologues by Maine's actors. And as most people know, the theater community was also deeply impacted, or has been, by the pandemic. So next week, same time, same bat channel, as they used to say. So great. Everybody have a good evening and a good
Thank
weekend.
you.
And thank you for joining us very much.
Thanks
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.